Hello and welcome. My name is Christina and I'm a member of the team working at the Erasmus Plus program within eCourse UK. I'll be presenting today the assessment webinar, which is part of your compulsory activities in order to be considered assessor for the current 2019 Key Action 1 Erasmus Plus call. On the screen you can see an overview of what we'll be covering in today's webinar. I will first briefly present the Erasmus Plus program to clarify its key points and aims. I will then talk you through Key Action 1 and the actions it covers. Before moving to the assessment process, I will detail the key changes in the 2019 call, referring to both program guide and the application form. I will then explain the assessment process, the duties the assessor role entails, and what we expect from you. I will move then to explaining you the OEET platform and how to use it, and I will conclude with an overview on the Key Action 1 budget requirements. The final slide will be dedicated to the next steps and deadlines. Firstly, in this session, I'm going to talk you through an overview of the Erasmus Plus program and Key Action 1 mobility projects. Erasmus Plus is the European Union program for education, training, youth and sport. It runs for 7 years, from 2014 to 2020, with organizations invited to apply for funding each year for life-changing activities. The Department of Education oversees Erasmus Plus in the UK. The program is managed by the UK National Agency, which is a partnership between the British Council and eCourse UK. Erasmus Plus aims to modernize education, training, and youth work across Europe. It is open to education, training, youth, and sport organizations across all sectors of lifelong learning, including school education, further education and higher education, adult education, and the youth sector. Organizations can apply for funding under 3 key actions. Key Action 1 is for mobility of individuals, for students, learners, trainees, staff, to go abroad to learn new skills, boost career prospects, and gain cultural awareness. Key Action 2 is for cooperation for innovation and exchange of good practices, where organizations from different countries team up to improve the offer for learners through innovative ideas and activities. Key Action 3 is support for policy reform, where young people can engage with policymakers and public authorities to stimulate innovative policy development. The Erasmus Plus shall contribute to the achievement of the following main objectives: the objectives of Europe 2020 strategy, the objectives of the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training, the sustainable development of partners countries in the field of higher education, the overall objectives of the renewed framework for European cooperation in the youth field, the objective of developing the European dimension in sport, the promotion of European values. The important features of Erasmus Plus are detailed in Part A of the program guide and include recognition of skills, multilingualism, and inclusion. Please look through them carefully in your own time. At the end of the next session, you will also find a slide with links to the key documents related to the Europe 2020 strategy and the strategic framework for European cooperation in education and training, which are part of the mandatory readings. We will now move to Key Action 1, and I will explain it in more details. On the screen you can see the general definition of VET as per the 2019 program guide. Under this definition can fall also the continual vocational education and training, and this includes staff or trainers involved in any form of VET education or training with the aim of improving or updating their knowledge and their skills, or enabling participants to continue with their professional development. This could include VET trainers in a college or within an organization supporting staff to develop their skills. If you come across an application potentially involving CVET and you are unsure, please contact your national agency mentor who will be able to offer advice on a case-by-case basis. With regards to VET learners, These can be full-time students, part-time students, or apprentices involved in initial VET education or training, such as BTEC or NVQ. Recent VET graduates are also covered by this strand of the program as long as they undertake the placement within 12 months of graduating. T-level learners can also be considered as VET learners, provided that their qualification has a compulsory work placement element to it. T-levels are new 2-year courses designed with employers to give young people the skills that the specific industry needs. From 2020, they will give post-GCSE students a technical alternative to A-levels and will help them to get a skilled job. You need to be extremely mindful when checking qualifications, as these relate to the project eligibility. Here you can see the definition of adult education, taken from the 2019 Erasmus Plus program guide. Key Action 1 adult education projects can involve staff members of any adult education provider, for example social enterprises, NGOs, private company, and others. Please note that for staff teaching in primary school children, for example, this will not be eligible under Key Action 1 adult education, as the application should be placed under Key Action 1 school. So what is Key Action 1? Organization can apply for funding to send learners or staff to another program country to undertake a learning activity. The key aim of this action is to promote transnational mobility activities, supporting the development of participants and participating organizations in a range of ways. From page 29 to page 32 of the 2019 program guide, you can find more information about this. The project itself must consist of the following stages: preparation, which is stage 1, and entails the management and organization of the project as a whole, the recruitment and selection of participants, the setup of the agreements with partners and participants, linguistic, cultural, and pedagogical tasks related to the preparation. Implementation will be considered as stage 2, and this involves the delivering of the mobilities for the participants. Follow-up will be stage 3, and this entails evaluation, recognition of learning outcomes, and dissemination activities. For Key Action 1 activities, we can have learner mobility for VET only, and this allows apprentices, students, and recent graduates from vocational training schools to undertake a vocational training placement abroad in VET providers or in companies for a duration between 2 weeks or 3 months. 2 weeks to 3 months. Please be mindful that a project with mobility's duration out of these parameters cannot be funded. If the placement is hosted in a VET provider, it must comprehend periods of work-based learning in an enterprise or other relevant organization. The aim of the learner mobility activity for VET is to strengthen the employability of young people and to facilitate their transition into the labor market. In December 2016, the communication Investing in Europe's Youth launched Erasmus Pro, a policy initiative aimed at increasing long-term mobility abroad for vocational education and training learners, including apprentices or recent graduates. Erasmus Pro responds to calls by the European Parliament, as well as companies and other VET stakeholders, to increase the quality, the attractiveness, and the employability of VET learners through long-term work placements abroad. Erasmus Pro mobilities can last from 3 months up to 12 months. The ineligible target groups that this activity is not open to are higher education graduates. For staff mobility in both VET and adult education, the aim is to provide VET or adult education staff with an opportunity for professional development, which will also increase their organization's education provision. This funding also offers an opportunity for staff to gain competencies in addressing the needs of learners with disadvantaged backgrounds. Mobility activities can last from 2 days to 2 months, excluding travel time, and must be consecutive. Staff must be based in the UK and must undertake their mobility in an eligible organisation based in another programme country. A staff mobility project can comprehend the following activities: teaching or training assignments, which allows vet and adult education staff to teach or provide training at a vet school or an education organisation abroad; and job shadowing, which allows vet and adult education staff to spend a period abroad in a partner school or another relevant organisation active in the field of school education or adult education. Organizations wishing to participate in a Key Action 1 mobility project can be public or private as long as they are active in the field of vet, if they are vet applicants, or in the field of adult education for adult education applications, or active within the labour market or in the fields of education and training. There must be at least one UK organisation and one transnational partner included in each application. Types of participating organisation you may see would include the applicant organisation, which is in charge of applying for the mobility project, signing and managing the grant agreement, and reporting. The applicant can be a consortium coordinator, and this means that it will be leading a national mobility consortium of partners organizations of the same country aimed at sending vet learners and staff to activities abroad. The National Mobility Consortium Coordinator can also, but not necessarily, act as a sending organization. The applicant organization is considered the overall responsible for the delivery of the project and will be the first point of contact for the national agency. The sending organization will be in charge of selecting vet learners and staff and sending them abroad. The sending organization is only relevant to consortia, otherwise this role is taken on by the applicant organization. Receiving organization is in charge of receiving foreign vet learners or staff and offering them a program of activities in line with their qualification or field of study. Adult education projects do not have to list their receiving organization at application stage, however vet projects do. Intermediary organization, for vet only, is an organization active in the labour market or in the field of education, training and youth, which is not a sending organization, but whose expertise allows it to assist the sending providers with administrative procedures, practical arrangements, matching apprentice or learner profiles with the need of companies in case of trainerships, and preparing the participants. If the intermediary organization is a partner in a national mobility consortium, its contribution must be clearly described as part of the project application. In case the intermediary organization is not part of a national mobility consortium, applicant organizations are strongly advised to formally define a set of rights and obligations when cooperating with such intermediary organizations. As with the 2019 call, if an application is submitted on behalf of a consortium, as indicated in the application, there must be also a minimum of 2 UK-based vet partners. However, an applicant may wish to submit an application not as a consortium and include UK partners. There is no minimum number requirement here. As you can see on your screen, there have been a few changes since last year's call. The principal change for the 2019 application form is that the application form is now a web form, which means it is submitted via a web browser rather than a PDF. This has resulted in a change in the structure of the form. Many of the questions remain the same, however, there is a change in the sections or order in comparison to previous call years. In addition, many of the questions have been rephrased to ensure that the meaning is clearer. There are additional questions focused on the European Development Plan, asking for information around the needs of organizations and their consortium. For some questions, you will find that there is a smaller character limit than previously. This application form no longer requests the profile and background of the hosting organizations. An application need only to be submitted with one hosting organization, with other organizations able to be added to the project at a later stage. If organizations do not identify all hosting organizations in their application form, they are asked to provide the methods in which they aim to identify these during the project lifecycle. This is applicable to VAT for the first time, as only one translational partner needs to be identified at application stage under the 2019 call. With regards to the budget, there are some major changes that will impact the assessment of 2019 applications. Firstly, the grant calculated is an estimated grant, as applicants no longer need to enter the precise number of flows and their durations. They will instead enter the average duration and the total number of days to be delivered. Secondly, mobility destinations are entered under 3 different country groups, which are listed in the program guide at page 62 rather than the exact country. For Group 1, we have Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Sweden, Ireland, Finland, and Liechtenstein. For Group 2, we have the Netherlands, Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Cyprus, Greece, Malta, and Portugal. For Group 3, we have Slovenia, Estonia, Latvia, Croatia, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Lithuania, Turkey, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, and Serbia. Finally, as the exact durations and destination are not defined at application, the overall grant will be an estimated value. Above the budget section, the applicants will see the following statement. During project implementation, estimated budget for specific activities and categories of costs, as well as the number of participants and average duration, may be adjusted. However, the total budget requested for the project may not be increased at a later stage. The aim of these changes is to allow more flexibility within the project lifecycle, but ultimately, organizations cannot increase what they request at application stage. As with previous call years, 2019 applicants can choose the length of projects to be from 12 months up to a maximum of 24 months. In the 2019 call for proposal, British applicants must be aware that eligibility criteria must be complied with for the entire duration of the grant. If the United Kingdom withdraws from the European Union during the grant period without concluding an agreement with the European Union itself, ensuring in particular that British applicants continue to be eligible, they will cease to receive EU funding, or will be required to leave the project on the basis of the relevant provisions of the grant agreement on termination. If there is any indication within an application that eligibility will not be maintained throughout the period, please reflect this in your comments. There have been some changes to the budget, and I'm going to go through the main changes now. As the durations are averages, the amount requested for individual support and travel are estimated grants. During project implementation, estimated budgets for specific activities and categories of costs, as well as the number of participants and average duration, may be adjusted. However, the total budget requested for the project may not be increased beyond what is proposed at application. This allows for an increase in flexibility for the beneficiaries, especially with regards to travel destinations. Exceptional costs are additional costs to support the participation of learners and staff members with fewer opportunities. This will be allowed provided that applicants can justify that the standard funding rules, based on unit costs per travel distance band, do not cover at least 70% of the travel costs for participants. Justification must be provided within the application form, as there is room for applicants to provide justification at the end of the budget section in the form. Applicants can claim up to a maximum of 80% of the total eligible costs. Exceptional costs can also be costs for providing a financial guarantee if the national agency asks for it. Applicants can claim up to a maximum of the 75% of the real cost. Assessors can reduce the amount of exceptional costs requested if the request is considered too large or a clear justification has not been provided. In the 2019 Programme Guide, additional wording has been added clarifying that if awarded, the exceptional cost for expensive travel replace the standard travel grant, and this can be seen at page 56. With regards to organizational support, the form allows for organizations to enter participants not requiring individual support and travel grants, but they are able to claim organizational support for these participants. All aspects related to the budget will be explained more in detail by the end of this webinar. Here you can see a list of policy documents that are mandatory for our expert to read. More policy documents are available in Annex 3 of the Guide for Experts. Alongside the policy documents, you will also need to read the Guide for Assessors from the European Commission, the relevant sections of the Programme Guide, the 2019 Guide for Applicants, and the National Agency Guide for Assessors. We will provide you with printed versions of the majority of the guides and today's webinar presentation notes on Thursday, the 31st of Jan. In this section, I'm going to talk you through the assessment process, what the role the national agency plays in this, what your role as an assessor is, and what we expect from you. The assessment process is carried out in two stages. The first is the login stage, where applications are logged and checked that they meet the eligibility requirements for the key action. The second is the qualitative assessment stage, where the quality of the applications is assessed by the recruited external assessors in line with the award criteria for the key action. Once the NA has the final number of eligible applications, the applications are allocated to the external assessors. An application can be assessed by one or two assessors based on the grant amount requested. If the grant is €60,000 or less, it is assessed by one assessor. If it is above €60,000, the application is assessed by two assessors. A first assessment is carried out by the assessor and submitted using the OEET tool, and we'll talk more about this later on. Once this first assessment has been submitted, the lead assessor will then have to create and submit a consolidated version based on the scores of both assessors, and that will consolidate the two sets of comments from both assessors and reflects the combined scoring. Once all assessments have been carried out, the applications are then ranked in order of merit and put forward to a panel of voting members at the National Evaluation Committee, who have the final say in whether the assessment decisions that have been reached still stand. According to the European Commission's Guide for Experts, the role of an assessor is to provide a fair, impartial, consistent and accurate assessment of project applications according to the objectives of the action. We are looking to appoint external assessors to guarantee the applications are assessed independently of the national agency and with no conflict of interest at this round of application. Once the final list of applications needing to be assessed has been produced, you will receive a declaration of the Prevention of Conflicts of Interest form, which you must sign and return to us along with your order contract. In line with this, you must declare any potential conflict of interest to the national agency, and before you start assessing, you will be given a list of applications so that you can check this. You can find a definition of a conflict of interest on page 3 of the Guidance for Assessors. You have been selected as an external assessor based on your knowledge and expertise in education and training, and we expect you to draw upon this expertise when carrying out your assessments to underpin their quality within the relevant field. All information within the application form is confidential, and you must not disclose this information to third parties, nor try to make contact with an applicant directly. As an assessor, you are also required to adhere to all guidelines on assessment, such as those in the Erasmus Plus Guide for Experts, as well as the terms in the framework contract that you will have signed prior to starting your allocated assessments. To maintain independence of your assessment, you should not consult with any other assessor when carrying out your first assessment. However, the national agency may ask you to contact other assessors to moderate the consolidated version of an assessment. The national agency can also provide guidance if you have any queries about an application, but we are not permitted to advise you on what our decision to make. You are expected to score the application in line with the award criteria and to provide an overall score. Alongside these, you will need to provide detailed feedback to the national agency. In the comments, you must provide a thorough analysis of the application, highlighting its relative strengths and weaknesses and indicating what improvements could be made. Before starting your assessments, you will be assigned to a national agency mentor. They will send you an email to introduce themselves. Your mentor is your first point of contact, and you should direct any queries you have directly to them. The role of your mentor is to provide clear guidance to you regarding your assessments and will provide feedback on the first assessment that you carry out. As already mentioned, they cannot influence your assessment, but can offer clarification on any issues you may have. Your mentor will also check your progress in respect of completing your allocation and ensuring you are meeting milestones deadlines, which will be covered at the Assessor training day. Your mentor is required to check the quality of your assessments in terms whether the scoring fits the comments, whether all the award criteria has been met, and to check the quality of your written comments and feedback. They are also required to facilitate discussion between you and other assessor at the consolidation stage. The general assessment principles are to take a positive approach to assessing. Application forms containing ineligible target groups or activities cannot be approved, but the national agency can counter most quality issues through our support monitoring mechanism, including monitoring calls, visits, on-the-spot checks, system checks, a dedicated project officer, the helpline, and a project handbook and a startup seminar. These should be considered in your assessment, as this support will mediate and manage many of the qualitative concerns found within an application, so issues of this nature should be set as recommendations for improving rather than reasons not to make a specific project successful. The award criteria are there to support your assessment. However, the national agency does not expect every application to address each criteria in their application, so do not expect to see this. Private sector organizations have a crucial role to play in the sector, and their involvement in the program is an area of particular importance to the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and the European Commission. For clear fails, there should be no score that indicate a sitting on the fence approach to assessment, with applications failing to meet the threshold by 1 point as example. Assessors need to ensure that they are clearly defining whether a project should be successful or unsuccessful within their scoring. You are required to make detailed recommendations on budget cuts if needed, including from which activity and by how many. The national agency will then action changes in preparation for the National Evaluation Committee. Please ensure you are constructive with your assessment, not critical, to encourage reapplication where appropriate. The feedback needs to be constructive to help them improve their application going forward. All Key Action 1 applications are scored out of 100 points, with each of the 3 award criteria being scored out of 30 or 40. In the 2019 Program Guide, a new element has been added under the Relevance Award criteria only for VET mobility projects, and you can find it at page 55. Which is the extent to which the proposal is reaching out the target groups with fewer opportunities and or involving organizations who are newcomers to the action. A definition of people with fewer opportunities can be found in Part A of the guide, section Equity and Inclusion. To be considered for funding, proposals must score at least 60 points. Furthermore, they must score at least half of the maximum points in each of the categories of award criteria mentioned above. When assessing a mobility project proposing Erasmus Pro activities, please bear in mind to check the learning outcome validation methods, as this criterion will carry higher than average influence on the assessment score for such kind of project. The maximum grant amount awarded for selected projects will depend on a number of elements: the number and duration of mobility periods applied for, the extent to which the proposal integrates long-term mobility from 3 to 12 months duration for Erasmus Pro, the past performance of the applicant in terms of number of mobility periods, good quality in the implementation of activities, and sound financial management, in case the applicant has received a similar grant in previous years, the total national budget allocated for the mobility action. When assessing applications against award criteria, experts need to make a judgment on the extent to which applications meet the defined criteria. This judgment must be based on the information provided in the application. Experts cannot assume information that is not explicitly provided. Within the maximum number of points per award criterion, ranges of scores are defined that correspond to a fixed definition of the expected quality standard, so that as to be as coherent as possible across experts as well as across countries. The standards are the benchmarks you see in this slide. This slide also provides the definition of the 4 different quality standard benchmarks. Very good applications, when the application addresses all relevant aspects of the criterion in question convincingly and successfully. Good applications, when the application addresses the criterion well, although some small improvements could be made. Fair application, the application broadly addresses the criterion, but there are some weaknesses. Weak application, when the application fails to address the criterion or cannot be judged due to missing or incomplete information. Experts are expected to give comments on each award criterion, and in their comments refer explicitly to the elements of analysis under the relevant criterion. The comments on each award criterion have to reflect and justify the score given for it. At the end of the assessment, experts must give overall comments on the application as a whole. In the comments, experts must provide a sound analysis of the application, highlighting its relative strengths and weaknesses, and indicating what improvements could be made. When completing your assessment, please bear in mind all aspects of the project lifecycle, from preparatory activities, project implementation, and follow-up. You also need to take into account the value for money linked to the European policies, placement validation, learning outcomes specifically for ECVAC and Europass, as well as the European added value to the project. You should read the entire application before assessing, and ensure that you are only assessing the information within the application and supporting annexes. You should also read a few applications before starting to enable you to benchmark your scores. You must also take into account the proportionality principle, meaning that the size of the project and the grant requested should be considered when undertaking your quality assessment. This should also be in relation to the size and profile of applicant organizations, and if applicable, project partners. For example, this may mean that smaller projects will have smaller outputs and expected impact than larger ones. You can refer to the assessor guidance as well as contacting your national agency mentor for further clarification regarding this following the assessor training day. Moderation is necessary when there is a score difference of 30 points or more in the assessment result of both assessors, or when one assessor passes and one fails. Your national agency mentor will contact you in any instances of moderation. It will be your responsibility to discuss with your paired assessor and to come to a decision regarding scoring or the pass, pass-fail outcome. Where both assessors are not able to come to an agreement, the national agency will ask a third expert to undertake an additional independent assessment of the application. The final score will then be determined by the two assessments that are closest in terms of their overall score, and the most extreme assessment in terms of overall score would not be taken into account for the consolidated assessment. As mentioned previously, once you and the other assessor have completed your first assessments, you will be required to consolidate the two assessments. This is done by the lead expert, who is always named as Expert 1 in OEET. Once the two first assessments have been submitted, your national agency mentor will tell OEET to open a consolidation, and the lead expert will be then able to view the two sets of assessments and the final score and then consolidate the comments. Please ensure that you complete assessments in ascending numerical order. This will help to ensure that you are on track with your paired assessor, and the national agency can identify any moderation as soon as possible, as well as releasing assessments for consolidation. As in previous years, you will need to complete 3 assessments per day. As well as coming to an overall score for each application, you will need to provide a score for each individual award criteria. This score should be reflective of your comments and not to provide a breakdown for each individual element of analysis. As already mentioned, all information you obtain during the assessment process is confidential and should not be disclosed to any third party. We would also ask that you maintain regular contact with your national agency mentor to update them on progress and discuss any issue you may have. Your national agency mentor will also be in regular communication with you to see how you are getting on and ensuring you meet milestone deadlines through the assessment period. Any feedback that the national agency provides is intended to support you with the completion of your allocated assessments. Please ensure you take this on board and implement any necessary recommendations. You will need to complete a mock assessment in preparation for the assessor training session on the 31st of January. This will be sent to you with this webinar link, and you will need to ensure that it is completed and that your score for each award criteria are sent to the UK National Agency by midday the 30th of January. You will need to bring your notes and comments to the training session for discussion, as this will form the content of one of the workshops taking place on the day. Please bear in mind that the mock assessment, the webinar, and the training day are all compulsory in order to be selected for assessments in this core year. So now we're going to run through the OEET platform, the online expert evaluation tool. This is how you will be able to view and score the relevant applications assigned to you. OEET is the European Commission's online assessment tool, and it is used to evaluate the accreditation request, evaluate the quality of the application, evaluate interim and final reports. Using OEET is compulsory in Erasmus Plus and is used by both assessors and the national agency for assessing assessments assigned to you, accessing application forms and attachments, consolidate and finalize assessments between assessors when applicable, and for the national agency to monitor assessments via the OEET assessment monitoring tool. Data exchanged between OEET and ePlusLink, the internal national agency database, can be sent to OEET after eligibility check, sent to ePlusLink after consolidation assessment, can be the scores of consolidated assessment or the full text of the consolidated assessment. We, as the national agency, will create your EU login account with the email address you have provided us once you have been confirmed as an assessor for the 2019 call. The national agency will complete eligibility check, and then applications are sent to OEET. Once the national agency creates assessors accounts in OEET, OEET sends an email to Assessor informing them how to log in via the EU login and validate the OEET account. The Assessor follows the link in the email, logs in with the EU login, and then validates their account. So when you log in, this is what you will see. You will have your assessment list on your screen. Please check carefully that the list corresponds to the projects you have received. In case of a mismatch, notify your mentor at the national agency immediately. Once you've clicked on the assessment list, you will then be taken to the page with your assessments listed. From here, you click the Access button, which will take you into the assessment. Once you've clicked on Assess, this is what your page will look like. Near the top of the screen, you can see that it reads Decision. Please note that this is to be completed before submitting. The Expert Decision comment field should be completed and the final score checked. On the left, you will have all the different sections that you'll need to fill in. The section menu allows you to navigate between the different sections of the assessment or to return to the list of projects allocated to you. Please note that the menu content, its order, and the section labels vary according to the program or action that is under assessment. The general screen gives an overview of project details and evaluation. The final decision and comments are entered on this screen. The scoring screen shows the award criteria, which I'll show you in a little later. The typology screen has questions for you to tick around the eligibility criteria and statistical data. You then have the comments for the national agency and overall comments for the applicant screen, which have a text box for you to fill in. The document screen will provide you with all documents submitted with the application, and this can be downloaded for you to look at in line with the application. Last but not least, we have the submission screen. This is the scoring screen. The scoring section contains the award criteria to be evaluated as explained before. Each criterion has to be given a score, and a supporting comment may also be required. Please remember to save your work on a regular basis. This is what your submission screen will look like. You will not be able to submit your assessment until all scores and mandatory comments have been recorded and saved. On clicking on Submit, the expert declares, to the best of the knowledge, that I have no conflict of interest with the organization or any of the person having submitted this grant application. Furthermore, I confirm that I will not communicate to any third party any information that may be disclosed to me in the context of my work as an expert. Once you've clicked Submit, there will be a watermark on the pages that you click within the assessment. As you can see on screen, the submission date and the decision are added onto the project list. You cannot modify the assessment after submission. It is read-only after submission. If you have made a mistake or omitted some information, you must contact your national agency immediately. If the proposed changes are approved, the assessment will be reopened and you will be able to revise and resubmit it. The reopened assessment will be identified as version 2 and will contain all the information you originally entered. The original submission date is cleared and the new version number is displayed on the general page. Projects that are assigned to you for consolidation bear the type code CONS. Click on an Assess button to begin the consolidation. This is what your consolidation screen looks like. It's very similar to the first assessment. If you're working with another expert, both of your assessments will be pasted into the consolidation, clearly marked as X1 and X2. You will need to ensure that you delete these headings and edit the text. Submission is exactly the same as the individual assessment. There will be an assessment validation button on the left where you can click Submit. This may sound quite obvious, but we do recommend that you write assessment offline and save them so that you don't lose anything. When you're writing content directly into OEET, please save it regularly and please submit each assessment as you finish it. This assists your mentor and the assessment process as a whole. We recommend, where possible, that you use a PC and Internet Explorer as a browser to work on your assessments. In this section, I'm going to cover the Key Action 1 budget and explain what costs are covered by each budget heading, how these costs are calculated, and what checks you need to carry out as part of your assessment of a project and its budget. The Key Action 1 budget is divided into potentially 7 individual budget headings. The first 3 of these, organizational support, travel, and individual support, form the essential components of any Key Action 1 project, and all applicants have to request and calculate amounts for these for the e-form to be submitted successfully. The other 4 can only be requested in specific circumstances or to cover specific costs. Organizational support contributes towards the cost of implementing and organizing the mobility activities and covers the costs of activities such as preparing the participants before the mobility and monitoring their progress. Travel costs cover the cost of return travel to the country where the mobility is taking place. Individual support covers day-to-day living and subsistence costs such as accommodation and food. Applicants can also request travel and individual support costs for accompanied persons, who can either accompany an individual with special needs or can accompany learners for monitoring and support purposes. Funding for linguistic support is only available for VET learners undertaking a mobility activity lasting 19 days excluding travel time or longer, and only in those cases where the language is not yet supported by the European Commission's online linguistic service. Those cases where the language is supported by the OLS, the applicant will instead be granted licenses for the participants to use the OLS as part of their linguistic preparation. Course fees are only available to adult education staff undertaking a training course abroad, to a maximum of €700 per participant mobility. Special needs support covers the costs related to participants with disabilities and any additional costs that an accompanied person may incur outside of travel and individual support. Exceptional costs cover costs that support participants with fewer opportunities. For example, the cost of purchasing or renewing a passport for a disadvantaged learner. They can also cover the cost of providing a financial guarantee, but this is very rare, which the national agency may request if a financial capacity check identifies that an applicant has low or poor financial capacity. Exceptional costs now also includes expensive travel costs of participants from the outermost regions and overseas countries and territories, so you may see some additional costs included here. Under exceptional costs, expensive travel costs can be claimed up to the 80%. Please flag this in budget comments to the national agency for us to review. Some parts of the budget, such as organizational support, linguistic support, travel and individual support, are calculated using unit costs. What we mean by unit cost is that these parts of the budget are calculated using fixed rates set by the European Commission. You can find information about these rates in the Key Action 1 VET and Adult Education Guides for applicants and on pages 59 and 60 and 74 and 75 of the 2019 Erasmus Plus Program Guide. Organizational support is calculated on the basis of a set rate and on the overall numbers of participants. As mentioned before, linguistic support is usually granted in the form of a licenses for OLS. However, for those languages not supported by OLS, the applicant can request a grant of €150 per participant to cover linguistic preparation. We rely on you to inform us if correct costs are being claimed here, whether they meet the eligible criteria, are for VET learners only, and are for activities lasting at least 19 days or longer. and if they are claiming Bulgarian, Czech, Danish, German, Greek, Spanish, Finnish, French, Croatian, Hungarian, Italian, Dutch, Polish, Portuguese, Romanian, Slovak, and Swedish. These are several different rates for travel, which are calculated using distance bands set by the European Commission. The applicant is expected to choose the correct distance band by using an European Commission distance calculator that calculates the distance band between two destinations. The grant is then calculated on this basis and covers a return journey. You can find a link to the distance calculator in the Key Action 1 Vet Guide for applicants on the pages covering Section H of the application form. Individual support is calculated on the basis of set rates dependent on the country where the mobility is taking place. This table can be found on pages 62 and 69 for vet and on page 76 for adult education. Certain parts of the budget are calculated on the basis of actual costs, meaning that the applicant has to decide how much they want to request. In all cases, the applicant must give detailed justification for the costs that they are requesting, and if you, as an assessor, are not satisfied with that cost and how they are justified, you can recommend that they are removed from the budget. This is important to note that for all budget headings except linguistic support, there are no limits to the maximum amount that the applicant can request. However, in line with the guidance from the European Commission on proportionality, when facing a large grant request, you should consider the overall quality of the project and whether the applicant has demonstrated that they have the capacity to manage a large project. Applicants can now also claim exceptional costs for expensive travel costs. However, do note that the request for financial support to cover exceptional costs must be motivated in the application form. Up to 80% of the travel expenses can be requested under the exceptional cost budget. So, when checking the budgets as part of your assessment, what should be checking? All applications will have been eligibility checked prior to your assessment to ensure that the mobility fits within the eligible duration for that type of activity. However, you will need to assess that each activity is eligible and appropriate in terms of content as per the definition in the 2019 Erasmus Plus program guide. If you identify any potential ineligible activity, please highlight this in the budget comments section of OEET. Provided that the 2019 call introduces estimated budget, you will also need to check that the grant request has been calculated correctly. For example, have applicants requested funding for linguistic support for languages that are in fact supported by the OLS? Are the special needs and exceptional costs justified? Is the requested budget cost-effective? A grant request should only be reduced where necessary due to ineligible or incorrect costs. Your comments on the project's budget should clearly indicate whether a cost item ought to be reduced by the national agency and explain the reason for your recommendation. The national agency does not contact applicants for clarification on their budget, so you should not request this. Any suggestions to reduce the grant requested must be clearly detailed in the budget comments to the national agency section on the OEET. If you do not have any budget-related comments, you should write "not applicable" in the budget comments to the national agency section. If a grant request does not represent value for money in terms of the activities and outputs planned, then you should take this into account under the quality of the project design and implementation award criterion as per the Guide for Experts. Moving on to the next steps in the process. On your screen, you now can see the timeline that we are working to. Please note that the dates might be subject to change, and we will inform you on that in due course. A mock assessment application and associated documents will be emailed to you following this presentation. Please complete the mock assessment by midday, the 30th of January. You are also required to email the completed assessment back to the national agency in advance of the Assessor training day, together with your overall scores by midday the 30th of January. You will receive an email with all the instructions soon. Please bring your completed assessment notes and scores for each of the 3 award criteria along to the Assessor training day for further discussion. We will have your first assessment available for you as early as the 14th of February. However, if there are any technical issues, this date may change. We'll aim to have your entire allocation available by February the 16th, depending on if there have been any delays or issues during the application stage. The deadline for completion of the first assessment is the 18th of February. If you can get your first assessment done sooner, please let your national agency mentor know once they have introduced themselves. The quicker you submit the assessment, the quicker we can give you feedback and you can get on with the rest of your assessments. The 21st of February is the latest date for us to provide feedback. However, it may be done earlier if you and your mentor can accommodate this. The deadlines for all assessments to be completed, consolidations to be completed, and final revisions are extremely tight, and we have no flexibility. So if you think you're going to have any difficulties, please raise this with your national agency mentor as soon as possible. This concludes the Erasmus Plus 2019 Key Action 1 Assessor Training webinar. Once again, please complete the mock assessment and submit your overall scores to the national agency by midday the 30th of January. Thank you for attending this session today, and we look forward to working with you.